I'm Tandy Culpepper. In this episode of the Hollywood Beat,
can one man save the world?
We've spoken to him before about his Ukraine war anthem, Can One Man Save the World? Now he's written a new anthem, OK, tackling anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Here's my interview with John Ondrasik, aka Five for Fighting. Hi there, John. Thanks for joining me again. Seems like we just did this 5 minutes ago.
Tandy, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. So this new video, OK, I want to call it We Are Not OK for some reason. But it was born out of the October, we've spoken since the October 7th attack, haven't we? I believe we have, but then the fallout, the aftermath of that prodded you to write this song. Exactly for what reasons?
Well, you're right. I think we were all horrified by the events of October 7th, but to see within 24 hours, thousands of people celebrating the atrocities in Times Square, and then, of course, the moral collapse of so many of our institutions, from the media who really started quickly spouting Hamas propaganda in some points, certainly our college campuses run amok with anti-Semitism, and frankly, members of Congress. I think that really scared and shocked all of us, and we're still seeing that today, of course. So I felt kind of obligated to write a song about that. And that's really what OK is. And you're right, it probably should be called We're Not OK, because that's the chorus. But it really speaks to kind of this global phenomenon. It's not just about Hamas versus Israel. As you'll note, Tandy, in the video, over the words "Evil's on the March," I put Hamas right next to Putin, right next to Iran, right next to, frankly, the UN. Because in my mind, this is not a Hamas-Israel issue. It's a battle for civilization against those who want to tear it down. And I think that sentiment may be one reason why it's resonated globally.
There's a difference between feeling aggrieved justifiably for perceived wrongs and the barbarity that happened on October 7th. I believe the term that you used, or that maybe Sam Rubin on KTLA's interview with you used, is a false moral equivalency.
Yeah, that's very insightful. And I think you're right. I mean, a lot of people, when they watch this video, they say, oh, it's a pro-Israel video. It's an anti-Palestinian video. It's really not. It's actually a pro-Palestinian video. The hero.
Well, you've told me you're apolitical.
Oh yeah, look, if Israel had committed these atrocities on Palestinians, the song would remain the same, only the names would change. But the hero of this video, I have a line in the song, "We need every good woman, every good man." And I thought a lot about who do I put in that spot? There's a lot of candidates, a lot of people doing heroic things, but I put a Palestinian woman calling out Hamas for stealing the aid. In my hero section at the end, there's a son of a Hamas leader calling out the culture of death, where you start kids at 5 years old, teaching them to kill Jews. So in my mind, this is not a pro-Israel, anti-Palestinian video. It's an anti-evil video. And I understand that there's a lot of history and this, you can criticize Israel for decisions they make, and all that is fair game. But there's nothing that excuses the barbarity of October 7th. And we keep finding out, more and more details of how bad it was. We won't get into, graphic details, but the raping of young girls in front of their families, inserting objects into their body parts, cutting off pieces of their body and playing catch with them. That depravity, there's no there's no context. And that's really what this song is about. And it's really been disappointing to see how many people can't even say that. can't even say, the UN still has not condemned Hamas for October 7th. The UN's women group took 56 days to say, well, maybe raping Israeli women is bad. So this is what this is really about. It's about this moral clarity of, I don't want to talk about what happened 200 years ago, 1,000. We can have those conversations. I have sympathy with Palestinians. I have sympathy with Israelis, but this is calling out evil in the world, which it seems very hard for many people to do these days.
I was on a flight. I want to say it was from Europe to the United States. And there was the Vienna Boys Choir. You're talking about indoctrination of the young Palestinian kids. So here I am on this flight from Europe, and there are all these young, these pre-adolescent young guys on this flight, and I was like, "Who are you people?" And he said, "Oh, we're the Vienna Boys Choir," and I was like, "Well, that's pretty cool because they're worldwide famous." And I said something to a flight attendant about I wanted some orange juice, and one of them said to me, "Jews," and I said, "No, juice, orange juice." And he said, "Oh, Jews. My parents say Jews are very bad." And this was 10 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And I was dumbfounded because how many years at that time was it? 70 years since World War II and the Holocaust?
Yeah.
And this was still a prevailing attitude in Austria at that time.
It's been an education for me as well. When Israel shared the video on their social media, I quickly learned what Jewish people deal with every day, the vitriol, the death threats. And, before October 7th, we knew anti-Semitism existed, but you expected it to be the crazies, the nut jobs, the people on the fringe. Like, oh yeah, they're just crazy. But to really see how embedded it is in so many cultures and politicians and nations and organizations, that has become self-evident in the last, couple months, or 5 months now since October 7th. It is just terribly depressing and illuminating. But yeah, I had no idea the depth of the anti-Semitism that still, infects the world in so many bodies and organizations and individuals.
Ondrasik, is that a Polish derivation or what is it is?
It's Slavic. It's Slavic. So yes.
Slavic.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you if it's a personal question, if you were Jewish, Catholic, what's your I'm Protestant.
Yeah. I'm not a very religious person. I was raised Christian. My sister's a Presbyterian minister, so I was raised Christian. Yeah, we kind of celebrate Christmas and all of that stuff, of course.
So you don't have a dog in that fight?
No, and I think it's been, again, I think it's been another reason why it's been impactful is that I'm not Jewish. There are historic Jewish, heroic Jewish celebrities and people speaking out. But to
I
me,
sent you that list that I
yes.
came across.
Yeah,
there were no musicians of note in there.
There were none. I was actually with Deborah Messing Saturday night and was actually speaking to her today. And you're right, most of the leaders of the kind of outcry in Hollywood are Jewish, but not all of them. Patricia Heaton, you'll remember from Everyone Loves Raymond. She's been very, very vocal speaking for Israel, and she's a hardcore Christian woman. So to me, this is not about religion. I said the other night in a speech, it's like, you don't have to be Jewish to condemn Hamas. You have to be human. You have to have a brain. You have to have a heart. And the fact that so many non-Jews are afraid to speak out or haven't spoke out, particularly as you mentioned, the music business. It's incredibly shameful. It's a historic shame. And, I get asked two questions, Tandy, in virtually every interview. The first is, why did you do this? That's pretty obvious. We talked about it, that it's the right thing to do. And the other is, where's everybody else in the music industry? And not just, non-Jewish artists, Jewish artists, Jewish icons haven't come out and said,
Barbra Streisand.
we can go down the list. Now, hopefully that will change. And I think you're starting to see a few signs of it opening up. But yeah, it's just blown my mind. I had the honor of singing at the concert for New York after 9/11. I was just one little kid who had a hit, that just came out. But every living icon was on that stage. Billy Joel, Paul McCartney, U2, Clapton, Pete Townsend. If you were an icon, you were on that stage saying, what happened here was terrible. And we're going to give solace to the New Yorkers and the people in DC and the world. And we're going to make a statement. Where are all those folks? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you.
It's frustrating. President Biden came out, I think it was a week ago, perhaps, and said something to the effect of that the Israeli response had been, quote unquote, over the top, which is neither fish nor fowl. I mean, the vice president, Kamala Harris, at a commemoration for Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, yesterday, delivered, before she got around to talking about the commemoration of the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, was talking about the deprivation of Palestinians in Gaza not getting water, fuel, or food. And it has gotten to the point now, my brother, sister, and I have been talking about, I don't know how many siblings are as politically involved as the three of us are, but that's our nature. And we've been talking about this nonstop since October 7th. And there are two, to play the devil's advocate, two schools of thought here. There was that horrific, out of nowhere, we'll get to that in a minute, slaughter on October 7th. And in that amount of time, I think that the civilian deaths have passed the 30,000 mark. And it has gotten to the point, if you're probably aware of this, unless you're not attuned politically as I am, to what happened in Michigan, the primary.
Yes.
Okay.
The uncommitted voter.
Right.
Yeah.
The margin of victory that Biden and Harris had over Trump and Pence was about 150,000.
Yeah.
And the number of uncommitteds was not much less than that. And that's a battleground state. And there's a very real possibility that this situation following October 7th could cost Biden the election. How do you circle that square? Or, I mean, I'm not sure how to react to that, but you see what I'm saying? It's become now it has become fraught with politics domestically.
No, certainly you're right. And I think you're seeing this kind of pull and push. Initially after October 7th, I thought President Biden was very good, went to Israel, said all the right things, stood with them. And I think some of his people, Kirby and some of those guys, when asked about kind of what's going on in Palestine, I think they say the right things. It's like, if you really care about Palestine, are you condemning the human shields that they're using? The humanitarian aid that they steal? There's trucks, tons of trucks outside trying to get in, but Hamas's goal is to have as many Palestinians as killed as possible to use for propaganda. That's they don't care about their own citizens. They do it every time. This is the strategy. And it's really hard, because you want to get aid to those people, you want to get aid to those kids. And I know we're dropping, airdropping food and
A pittance
yeah,
of what's
yeah.
needed.
Yeah, but it's something, and
It's something.
yeah, I'm like, do everything you can, but if you're also not calling out for Hamas to release the hostages, Hamas doesn't want a ceasefire. They keep like extend. So really, the best thing for Palestinians is to end this war and call out Hamas for what they're doing and let Israel do that. In the meantime, if you can do everything you can for the people there, my heart breaks for them. But Tandy, it sounds easy for me to say because I'm not a politician. To me, it's not about right or left. It's about right or wrong. And that's what this is. Israel, the biggest attack on Jews since the Holocaust, the whole world's turning against them. I've gotten thousands of emails from people in Israel and around the world just saying, thank you for your song, for your video. It's like, we think we're crazy. We are the people who marched for the civil rights movement. We stood hand in hand on these progressive issues. Many Jewish leaders are very left of center. And they're like, and now you abandon us? So I understand that, and understand everything's political. The Afghanistan withdrawal was political. Ukraine, I could sit and talk about the Republicans withholding aid from Ukraine, which I'm
And that's shameful.
Yeah, so I think both sides have a lot to be accountable for, but I think, America used to be like, we had our politics, but we kind of like stood up to the evil actors in the world. It wasn't about how many votes is this going to cost me in Dearborn,
Well, I will point out that during the Second World War, I think Catherine Ann Porter based her book Ship of Fools on this, but I won't swear to that. But there was a boatload of Jews fleeing Nazi persecution that was turned away by FDR.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Look, there's a lot of people who did a lot of bad things and made a lot of mistakes, but what really gets me is the silence of our industry, because we are Live Aid, we are Sun City, right? We are the Concert for New York. When there's these huge humanitarian issues, we have a history of the civil rights, the songs from the 60s, right? We have a history of being on the right side of good versus evil. And to me, that's what this is, even with kind of some of this gray area. And the fact that there's this deathly silence to me is heartbreaking. And look, I talk to people and they, in the room, they'll tell me what we're talking about, that Hamas is terrible, but they won't say it publicly. And I think that's shameful. And they say, well, I'm afraid for my family, and I'm afraid my concerts will be protested. And that's all true. I'm dealing with a little of that. That's true. But Tandy, if we go back in history, a lot of those arguments were used in 1938, right? Before World War II. The same artists are like, well, it's like, my family, or, I don't want to get in the middle of this. So as much as I understand that, I still find it unacceptable. And hopefully that can change to a certain degree, because boy, history is not going to look fondly on this time for us musicians and songwriters and bands particularly.
I've been reading a lot about the camps, memoirs written by, of course, there was the Diary of Anne Frank,
Yeah.
but reading about the perspective of persecuted Jews during the Second World War. And I was trying to understand what Hitler had against the Jews. And if you go back in time 2,000 years, not Hitler, but the Jews were the ones who killed Christ. Well, that's not true. It was the Romans. But Jesus was a Jew. So, I mean, it all just it boggles the mind. You said that Hamas didn't want this war to be over. Well, I will also posit that Netanyahu does not want this war to be over, and he has been completely intransigent about some of the things, especially as advanced by, because she's really carried the water on this, is Kamala Harris. Netanyahu was in trouble, legal peril before this started on charges of corruption, and he was trying to overhaul the judiciary, which had Israelis taking to the streets by the thousands to protest this. And some of those who were protesting were reservists who said, we're not going to take up arms in defense of Netanyahu. So the longer that this goes on, the longer that Netanyahu doesn't have to face his corruption trials. There is an ironic parallel between Netanyahu and Trump in that regard. It's so fraught with all these peripheral, intangible, and yet they are tangible facets. Netanyahu doesn't want the two-state solution. If he had helped with the Palestinian Authority to become more effective, then Hamas would not have become so powerful. And you're right, Hamas is keeping aid from getting to those who need it. And our government has finally waken up to this fact that we've got to do something to rattle the cage, get more food aid trucks in there, get water in there, all of this other stuff. But it's a quandary because we can't get Hamas or Netanyahu to play ball. And now I think Benny Gantz is his name. Last name is Gantz. He's the head of the opposition, is meeting with Kamala Harris today, or has already met with her. So it's you need the wisdom of King Solomon on this one.
Well, I do think it's interesting because so far, even Netanyahu's biggest detractors have been step in step with him to, we have to eliminate Hamas. It's the only long-term solution.
How?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I think you go in and you kill them, which they
Yes, but every time you kill one terrorist, you make two more.
Yes, but I think what's going to happen is there's going to be much more oversight in what happens in Gaza when this is over. I think you have to go get the leaders. You have to go, root out as much as you can to say, we're not going to go back to this cycle of you commit an atrocity, we come in, you use human shields, everybody says you're bad, and then you pull out, and 5 years ago it happens. Because I think Netanyahu, however this ends, he will be blamed for the catastrophic failure of security on October
Yes,
7th.
I was thinking
Yeah.
about that. Thank you for bringing that up.
So whatever happens, that inexcusable failure to protect, frankly, very liberal Jews, they're the most liberal Jews there that, that on the border there, the fact that it took 5 hours for soldiers to get to some of those communities, he will pay that price. So I think in the meantime, I think Israel will do what they believe they have to do, is root out Hamas. And how, as you said, who comes in after that, who knows? But I think they feel they have to do that. And to your Hitler point, I think I have a possible thought on that, because you're right. Why do these people say this? Why do they use it? To me, it's all about power. It's all about power, because you need an enemy.
Oh,
Because
yes.
you need an
Yes.
enemy. And if you don't have an enemy, then the population under you looks to you as the problem. So, Putin's trying to do that with Ukraine, calling them Nazis, kind of working, kind of not. But
The
so
president of Ukraine is Jewish.
as I said, it's not logical. It's like a cult. It's brainwashing. And you see this a lot in the Middle East, where they need an enemy. Their people are poor. Their people are suffering. They do not have freedom. Women are second-class citizens. So either you deal with that uprising, or you say the Jews are bad. And it's very evident that none of these people care about Palestinians. Look, you've heard it before. Syria killed hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. They would not allow any humanitarian aid in Yemen. Go down the list. Killed many more Palestinians. That's what's happening in Gaza. And the UN said nothing. There were no protests on our colleges. The media wasn't running, Hamas kind of statistics. So it's clear that this is not about the Palestinians. It's about power. And Israel has always been the front line of that spear. And so to me, that's what a lot of this is about. And at the gut of it, it's power combined with, raging anti-Semitism. And we forget there's 15 million Jews in the world. There's what, 3-4 million Jews in Israel, which is like, Thousand Oaks. It's so we forget they're just like this teeny group of people with half the world hoping they disappear. So
Yes, and 6 million were killed during the Holocaust.
right, so it's just this thing that just boggles your mind, and you're like, how can this be? And as we talked about, there's so many kind of tentacles to this thing that are unique to Israel. And I pray for a day that it's not like that, but I don't think that day's coming anytime soon.
It just speaks to the best and the worst of humankind.
Yeah. I mean, we see this in these horrible events. You read about we saw the firefighters run into those buildings on 9/11. You look at Zelensky, who was offered a plane ticket to leave with his family, and said, no, I'll stay and probably be murdered in a few days.
I don't need a ride, I need ammunition.
Yeah. And then you look at I heard some stories Saturday night at a Stand With Us event of just people on bicycles driving into the terrorists, rescuing people, and driving into the mayhem, and saving lives on the ground, and many people losing their lives, trying to rescue people. And so in the worst of times, you see the best of humanity as well. And it does give you hope for our species, in these dark times. And you do see people standing up and saying the right thing, and courageous people, some in Hollywood. And one thing that I saw at this Stand With Us event were 500 college and high school students from around the world, kind of Jewish mostly, but not all Jewish, coming together and learning about how to stand up to what's going on our college campuses and social media and legal opportunities. And you look in their eyes and you see their fortitude and their hope at 17, 18, 20, 23 years old. That gives you hope. That gives you hope. They want peace. They're compassionate people. but they will also not accept this raging anti-Semitism on their campuses. And so you got kids like that, Tandy. You know, it helps me sleep a little better at night.
John, thank you very much for taking time to speak with me today.
I always love our conversations. You're fantastic, and you know, hopefully next time we have brighter things to talk about.